So, hello, and welcome back to whatever the hell this is. Um, I wanted to do this on like semi-weekly basis, I guess, because I think it's fun to just sit down and talk into a microphone and upload it publicly, I guess. Um, but I didn't really have the time for it this weekend, so it's Monday now, and I guess I'm doing it Monday. Um, and with the new day comes a couple new things. So, of course, it's Monday now, so it's after work. I'm a bit tired. I've also eaten this time. So I think last time I was a little bit erratic because of like low blood sugar and shit. It was a thing. But I've had food now. It was curry. There was way too much lime juice in it. I think certain people who I know would not have enjoyed it because of it. I thought it was pretty good. Um, and also I have a glass of water with me this time. So that's nice. Yeah. But last time we talked about my fucking weirdo fan fiction slash OC universe thing from when I was a kid, Crown Guard, which I don't know. I'm just gonna upload these unedited, so I don't actually remember what I said. And I figured, and also because I was talking to someone today and we came into the topic of like fantasy settings and shit, and I talked about like, oh, my favorite fantasy setting, and I really like the world of Eorzea from Final Fantasy XIV. So much so, actually, that it's the world that Crown Guard takes place in, basically. Hence why everything about the trailer that I posted as well is Final Fantasy XIV related. So it's a whole lot of just Final Fantasy XIV stuff. It's basically just a like OC adventure set in the same world, albeit with a little bit different here and there. Excuse the coughing. I've had a little. It's a little weird. Oh, that was a big cough. But I paused the recording, so you shouldn't be able to hear it. All right. So I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about why I think Eorzea is such a cool setting, and it really just boils down to like, for one, I really like fantasy with like technology in it, because like in Eorzea, there's like sword and there's magic and there's shit, but this was like trains and cars and like big robots and guns and technology exists, and I think that's just like a cool mix of like what happens when you have sword magic and guns as well. It's also a big part of like a lot of the reason why I liked Final Fantasy 15 as well. It's because it's modern setting, but also magic, and also a lot of the reason why I really want to get into Shadowrun. Not so much Cyberpunk, but mostly Shadowrun. I think Shadowrun is super interesting. Which is like, of course, the cyberpunk thing with magic and elves and shit, but it's in a cyberpunk setting. So but this is more like fantasy stuff, and like I really like the idea of like having the technology and having the magic, and the magic powers some of the technology, but the technology is also there for people who cannot use magic. So it's kind of like a way to even the battle, like the playing field. It's like the whole thing, like in Avatar, when you have the non-benders who just can't do shit against benders. This is kind of like a way to even the playing field a little bit more. So even like non-magic people can still stand a chance. And so that's like one of the main things. I think like the technology level is super interesting. And the second thing is really like like a lot about the history of the world as well. I have like a couple talking points, but I did not structure anything, and I'm not going to do any research because this isn't a what's it called? It's not a video essay. So I don't actually have to be right. I just have to talk. um. So like the history is also super interesting, mostly because of the like you have the so the world in Final Fantasy 14 is split into 14 parts. Because like in the ancient times there was this one planet that I think it's called Aetheris. I don't remember. Either way, due to like the two main gods, Hydaelyn and Zodiark, who are like God and the devil equivalents, fighting, they cleave the world and split it into these like 14 different parts. So there's the source, which is where the majority of Final Fantasy 14 takes place in. And then you have the reflections, as they're called. And the reflections are interesting because they're kind of the same, but they're also just kind of different. They're kind of like different aspects of the world, and they're twisted in a sort of way, but they're all connected in a sense. And when Final Fantasy 14 starts is when you have the I think it's after the sixth calamity or something. So what basically happens is the evil ghost people, who they're evil ghosts basically. They travel around, they fuck shit up. They destabilize these reflections and force them to rejoin with Source in order to create the planet from back in the day. And so what basically happens is that 6 of these reflections have been consumed and returned to the source in a sense, which has done like big world shattering things, and it's whatever. But each of them kind of like, apparently they have like a different element. I did do a little bit of research, but there's like different types of ether and shit. So one of the reflections, the first, which is the one closest to the source, is you go there in one of the expansions, and basically the problem there is that the like light is so powerful because the reflection closest to the source, the like darkness has ceased to exist. There is not like night doesn't exist anymore. So there's so much of this like light ether, light energy around that the world like is on the brink of being consumed by this light ether and being rejoined with the source. And I just think it's interesting that you have like these different worlds that you can travel to, and these like they're kind of the same because you go to the first, like it's you have a lot of the same like races and you have a lot of the same like things, but it's also very different and has a completely different history. And it's almost like you take the one like point in time thousands of years ago, and then you diverge history in like 14 different directions, and you get the source and the reflections. And that's like, oh, it's such an interesting concept. And also just like, because they did like the 6 calamities, of course, but let's say they hadn't, then you have like 14 different like settings you can travel to around this world. Even now they still have like 4 left, I think. Math is hard. Like 14 minus 6 minus the one you already went to. So that's minus 7. So that's 7 left. Minus another one. So it's 6 left. That's the source. That's why you start. Okay, so that's like, I just think that's a cool thing. And it's also like, I don't remember a lot of, there's like a lot of history about like the politics and shit in the world, but that's like there's pirates and stuff, and they made their own little thing, and there's like capitalist wasteland country, and there's nature country, and they're like cool. And there was like an ad that popped up on my computer. I need to get rid of those fucking programs that always pop up and say like, oh, you need to pay premium for this like antivirus thing for this computer you barely ever use. Regardless, So like the reflections, I just think it's a very like cool concept, and the fact that you like on very rare occasions people can travel in between these, but the of course the main character, the Warrior of Light, the person you play as in Final Fantasy 14, is special and can travel between these different reflections sort of freely. Sort of freely. Mm. But so that's like a super cool thing. And that kind of leads me to the next thing, because like of course the Warrior of Light is special because they have been blessed by Hydaelyn, who is the god quote unquote equivalent. And what's interesting basically is that religion kind of plays a whole big part of like the world of Eorzea, but in a like kind of a weird way, because there are like people who have organized religion, and they're of course evil because it's a JRPG. And I'm not made to monologue. I ran out of breath. It's very weird. But I took a little thing of water. That should help. So but yeah, religion is like a big thing. You have like and I think like the one of the most interesting things is you have these like beastmen tribes, what they're called. And they're basically like uh intelligent monsters. Basically they're like intelligent versions of some of the enemies. And you like they're like cool, they're friendly, they're nice, they're chill, you can hang out with them and it's all good. And but they're also like kind of a inherent threat, because they have like, whereas Hydaelyn and Zodiac are like the big gods, there's also a lot of like smaller gods like Ifrit and Titan and Ramu and all these different classic Final Fantasy summons that you know if you've played any other Final Fantasy game basically. And what's super interesting here is that these are just like they're basically like the native people of this land, and the evil force, the Garlean forces, who are like the big evil guys in 14, they're trying to like they're trying to invade Eorzea basically. They come from a country called Garlemald, which is trying to invade Eorzea, trying to make it a thing. This whole whatever. But they are then trying to like egg on these beast tribes basically to make them summon their gods, because that's the thing they can do, and it requires a lot of sacrifice and it requires a lot of ether. So they have to farm these crystals and they do it. And basically what happens is you can't just have like these, of course they couldn't just summon these things. There has to be some sort of downside, right? There also has to be a reason to why they would have this sort of religion. And basically what it boils down to is that of course it's beneficial for the beastman tribes, because they can, it's like a perseverance thing, you know, they get to survive. But what does the god get out of it? Because they're not nice people, they're not good like gods doing it for the benevolence of things. They want to self-preserve as well. So basically what happens is that, let's say the goblins, they summon, I think it's Titan. So they use all their energy, pour all the crystals in. Basically they sacrifice a bunch of themselves also, I think. Not, it's been a good like couple of years. And they summon Titan. It's like, all right, Titan is now here. Titan will fuck anyone up who's trying to mess with the goblins or kobolds. I think it's kobolds, yeah. Who tries to mess with the kobolds. Great. But every kobold who has been touched by Titan's ether, like his magic energy, and basically any person also, anyone really, is then enthralled by Titan. So basically they are like, They are under his control. They obey his every command, basically. And even, of course, in 14, the Warrior of Light, who is immune to this, because they have the Blessing of Hydaelyn, they go, they kill Titan. It's a big boss fight. It's a cool fight. But you kill Titan. But even then, they're still enthralled. Because, so instead of, like, just listening to every command that Titan has, what they're instead is obsessed with trying to get Titan back. So it's like this whole thing of like preservation, and I think as far as I remember, a big part of the original, like the vanilla version of 14, or the base version of 14. The vanilla version is a whole other thing, but the base version of 14 is you're trying to go around to these different tribes and going like, hey, if you want to protect yourselves, don't fucking summon your god. Just like ask for help. We'll protect you. And don't not like just ask for help. Like they don't even have to ask. It's the whole thing. Like, yeah, I'll protect you. It's fine. But just don't do this stupid thing. You'll turn yourself into like servants of this god, basically. And I don't know, I think that's super interesting. And there's a lot of like different this goes in a lot of different ways. And there's of course there's the basics one where it's just like you go to a place and it's like, okay, these people have summoned Ifrit, and you beat up Ifrit, and then it's like in a lot of the game it's just like, okay, well, I guess that's there was nothing we could do. I guess we had to kill them because they tried to kill us. And it's like it's a shame. And they do kind of like later on they do kind of away with that, and I think that's nice. It's not just, well, there was nothing we could do, I guess we had to kill them in self-defense. But one of the more interesting ways, because they're called like I think they're called icons. No, icons is something else. Primals is what they're called. The gods, and like Titan and Ifrit, they're called primals. So they're like primal forces. Titan is the primal force of earth, and Ifrit is the primal force of fire, and you have like Garuda, who is the primal force of wind. So you have these different primals, and a lot of them, like, you fight them and it's fine. But one of them, my favorite, is Shiva, the primal, like, of ice. Because Shiva is kind of different. She's like, you meet this woman called Iceheart, who is, like, she is basically, like, she is, like, friends with dragons and stuff. There's very, like, there's a line in the game, and it's like, oh, fucking, I think it's like, oh, she layeth with dragons, which which I can't fucking believe is a thing that they. But yeah, so she lays with dragons, I guess, is the thing. But that's kind of regardless. You meet her, and because you're trying to, like, you think the dragons are evil, so you're trying to fight them, but it turns out they're not actually evil. It's just this one dragon that's an asshole, so you kill that one and yada yada, whatever. But basically, Iceheart is kind of like, she can turn into Shiva. So she is kind of Shiva, but not really, because she is a human. But what's super, super interesting about this, I feel like, is there's this, it's going to be a little bit of a tangent, but I swear it'll make sense when it comes back. This is a show called Young Justice, which is like, it's basically Avatar: The Last Airbender, but with superheroes. I don't know, I really liked it. So, I didn't watch the final season, but it was good. And there's this character called Professor Fate, I think, something like that, who's basically a spirit imbued in a helmet. And if you put on this helmet, then Professor Fate or Dr. Fate or whatever will take over your body and control you, and he can use his big, powerful, all like consuming magic and basically deal with whatever problem. But, of course, once Dr. Fate, Professor Fate, I'll just call him Professor Fate because I think that sounds better than Dr. Fate. When Professor Fate is summoned, of course, he's like, well, if you summoned me, that means there's a reason why I'm around. I need to stay around. And then there's, of course, this person is then locked forever, being trapped inside his own body because Professor Fate has now taken over. And, of course, every time in the show, they talk him down so that, whatever, give the person their life back. And they take off the helmet, and it's back to being another like MacGuffin Deus Ex Machina kind of thing. But here's why it all runs back, because in Final Fantasy 14, it's kind of, there's this Shiva kind of comes back in one time, and there's this really like interesting song that plays, and it's like I think it's so fucking good that I've been wanting to make an entire like thing out of it. I wanted to create a story based around this character, whether it be a D&D character. I think that would be a little bit hard, but it could work in a different way. Or like I wanted to write something, but of course I don't really write anymore. That's why I have this podcast. But basically what it is like the song just basically goes like it's basically there's this girl who is like, she's, I think it's a girl. Well, the Ice Heart and the girl for that is, they're ladies. And Shiva is a girl as well. So basically what happens is that this the song is about like this lady who is, she's like weary, she's tired, she's just barely holding out, and it's like she's on her last rope, and then she hears this like this calling to her, like, turn the light on. You'll never win unless you turn the light on. And like it is followed by this just like screeching, like this very, so the first is like, oh yeah, turn the light on. It's very inviting, it's very warm, it's very like, yeah, you just gotta turn the light on. Like, let her in. Let her solve your problems. Just turn the light on. And then you hear the screeching, evil, desperate yelling from like behind, from far away, just like, turn the light on. And it's fucking good. It's incredible. And this, I'll link it in the description. I think you should definitely give it a listen to it. Because I'm not gonna put it here. It might get copyright stricken or something. It's a wonderful song. And of course, what happens then is that this girl turns the light on and lets Shiva take over, and Shiva then does not relinquish control again. Is the thing. So she forfeits her life to this primal, basically letting her take over forever. And I think that's it's a fucked up story, but I think it's a very interesting story also. If I wanted to do it as a D&D character, I would do it as someone on the other side of this. Someone who had been taken over. Someone who had done this. And if ever I do a D&D campaign, I was gonna set it in Eorzea. Basically what I was gonna have, the story, what the story was gonna be is, players travel around, solve problems for these different beastmen tribes, and take care of the primals and stuff, gather the crystals, they're blessed by Heidelin, yada yada, whatever, all that fun stuff. But throughout they meet this girl, and she's like a small girl, and she's following around. She wants to be a warrior of light as well. Warriors of light are the ones who are blessed by Heidelin, basically. So she wants to be a warrior of light as well, but she doesn't have the blessing of Heidelin, so of course she doesn't have it. She can't be one. She's not immune to being enthralled by a primal, like coming under their control. So just kind of like she goes around, she like tries to learn how to fight. She becomes like a mage of some sort. She becomes like a black mage, learns some magic, fire and ice. That's what black mages do, mostly ice related. And of course, what happens is that at some point there's going to be some type of danger. When it comes up to like the one of the big bad people, and it seems like you see her trying to fight this boss, and maybe it's something like it's been built up to, and she's standing there, and everyone comes in. And it's like, oh no, we have to help her, but she's down. She's like hard. She's badly wounded. But before the party can get to her, then what happens is that she hears this calling. Let her in. Turn the light on. And she does. And in that moment, of course, she turns into Shiva, the primal of ice, and loses control of herself, and gives over her entire being to Shiva. And what happens, of course, is that Shiva absolutely fucking obliterates the evil person, the big bad, whatever. Like, wipes the floor with him, immediately just fucking dead. And then there's this moment where the party goes like, oh, I guess she's powerful now. I guess she's like, oh, cool, yay, what's up? You should, okay. Like, hey, you did this cool thing. Maybe, like, come back now, it's fine. But of course she doesn't. Of course she turns around. And she starts fighting the party instead. And I don't know if this is actually, like, an interesting concept, but I think it's an interesting story to tell of like what drives a person to become so desperate in their situation that they would forfeit their life in order to become something that they can never be. And I think that's, if I were to write it as a story on my own, I would basically focus a lot more on like her internal struggle of, she gets power from Shiva, of course. She hears the calling, and maybe Shiva like lends her a little bit, because like Shiva's just kind of like around in the live stream, basically. Like, she's not really bound to any physical place or anything. She's just like kind of feeling it out, being like, hey, and this lady, this girl, whatever her name would be, it's like, okay, yeah, if I push her along just a little bit, maybe Shiva can then resurrect. Maybe I can resurrect. Maybe it's good. And of course, it would end up as that. Looks like a tragic ending type thing. But yeah, it's a really good song. That song is like, I've been debating for like weeks and weeks now whether I should make the tweet of like how I wanted to write a story around Shiva's theme. But I guess I'm telling it here now, like 20 whatever minutes into whatever this podcast is. So yeah, I think Eorzea is a fucking interesting place. Because you have these people who have the blessing of God, basically. And you have these evil spooky ghosts who are going around trying to resurrect the devil, basically, the Zodiarch. And there's more to it. There's a lot more to it, and I don't want to say too much. Because, it's a good game. People should give it a shot, and there's a lot of lore there, and it's really interesting, I think. And that's big part of the reason why I like 14, is because I think the story beats that they go through are really interesting, and there is one thing that they did that I don't like, but that's also something that I would rectify if I were to make my own version, I guess. Because, like, I would like to DM someday. I think D&D is pretty fun. But I would either set it as, like, I would probably set it in Eorzea. Because it's a cool setting, but that also means that I have to make up everything. It comes with a lot of stuff already made, but that also means I have to make up everything myself. And of course, I can steal a lot of it from how 14 works and how the story goes, because most of the things would basically be the same, like the D&D version of it. But what was my point? I don't actually remember. Oh yeah, I would have also like. So Eorzea is one of the things that I would want to do, of course. I think also it's like something Shadowrunny would be interesting to do a campaign in, but of course I would need to find people who would be willing to play Shadowrun. And I think Eorzea works a lot better because you can just kind of set the magic system, the power, like the everything D&D related in the world of Eorzea. Even though I think a lot of what makes 14 interesting is the implications of the job system, which I also talked about last time. That people can change jobs, and you can be proficient in multiple fighting styles. And what doesn't, of course, it doesn't happen in the game, but what happens with like some of the cutscenes and stuff is that you can switch jobs during combat, and I think that's impossible to balance for in a video game, and it would be impossible to balance for in like a role-playing game too. Like, it could never happen, but I think it's interesting, and I think it would be cool. So yeah, I like Eorzea. Okay, it's my it's my favorite setting. I think it's got basically everything, and you do basically anything in it. It's a very kind of generic Final Fantasy setting because it borrows a lot from Final Fantasy VI with the Magitech and everything. It even has the same Magitech like suits, kind of these big robot type of things. It has like the crystals and the ether and yada yada. And so it's like it's all good. But it's a very like interesting place, and it's also very like varied with the locales and stuff. And of course it is an MMO, but oh yeah, I don't think I even mentioned that the Final Fantasy XIV is an MMORPG. I've been playing it for almost 10 years, I think. I think I started it around 2013, 2012, 2013-ish when I was in high school. So that's also why, like, Selphie is my Final Fantasy XIV character. And I had played the game a bunch when I started making Crown Guard. And so it's also just like a world that I've been in for a very long time and obviously means a lot to me in a lot of senses. Like, I'm very familiar with it. I think the story is super cool and super interesting. But there's something to be said about like cool settings. Like cool, kind of strange like fantasy settings. Because I think fantasy is very like it's a very interesting medium, just introducing magic, or a very interesting genre. Introducing magic just makes things just like it gives you a little bit of edge to make things like weird. And I think like Final Fantasy 14 hasn't really done this. It's kept things very grounded, but it's also done some quite strange things, like the whole thing with primals and the whole thing with the reflections and stuff. And the way that the forces of nature like work together. What the fuck? So I guess it's I should turn that off. I don't really use it. Either way, completely lost my point. Ah. Yeah, it's very like I like the interplay between like how the magic works and how the world works and stuff. And I think that's super interesting and how the reflections play into both what the evil ghosts are doing and also what the good people want and how it gives a lot of opportunities for like having diverging histories without time traveling as such. So yeah, this all basically stemmed from I was asked earlier, like, yeah, what is your favorite fantasy setting? And I kind of had to hold myself back from ranting. I've talked for like 35 minutes right now. I had to spare this poor lady who I've talked to for like a little over 2 weeks now. I had to spare her this rant. So here it is in a microphone, and it's uploaded. It's gonna upload it to the internet. It'll be uploaded if you're listening to this. And yeah, it's opt-in is a lot better. I can rant into microphones now, and I make it as long as I want because it's fine. So yeah, that's basically it. Stay tuned. I guess I'm gonna make more. I talked to a friend of mine about making an episode of this basically together, and I think that would be fun. I've talked to multiple friends about this, and of course, anyone is welcome to jump on talk about whatever random bullshit. Now I've had like specific subjects to talk about, but it is also just like a place to talk about whatever the fuck. And maybe that'll become quite evident quite soon. But until next time, I guess I'll see you around. Bye.